Hi, everyone. Welcome to Congress Park Neighborhood Meeting this evening. I want to thank everyone for coming. Congress Park Neighbors is an RNO that's been in existence for over 40 years. Our role in the neighborhood is not as an HOA, but as a liaison between the city and the neighborhood. We bring issues that affect our neighborhood with city policies, and we also take neighborhood concerns to the city. We don't take stands without taking a vote and actually representing neighbors. And we represent both homeowners and renters alike, and hope everyone will participate. This meeting is going to be recorded. And if everyone could kind of limit their questions to the chat while we are presenting the material, and then afterwards I will open it up for questions and discussion. We have a big topic tonight. We're going to be talking about a proposed conservation overlay for our neighborhood. And Josh Palmieri is here with the planning department. He is our liaison that we have been working with the neighborhood groups to come up with 8 different zoning points that we would like to incorporate in an overlay. There's a couple things about an overlay that I want to review. At our last meeting, planning gave a great presentation on what an overlay does and does not do. I want to remind everyone an overlay is a zoning tool. It is not an HOA. It is not a review board. It is not a historical designation. An overlay is a zoning tool that can be used to promote preserving character and scale to a neighborhood. An overlay will not prevent scrapes, and the zoning tools only affect new construction. And I'll keep repeating that. It will only affect new construction. So I'm going to share my screen, and there we go. Congress Park has about 7 or 8 different zoning codes in our statistical neighborhood, and the overlay will only address a limited number of those codes. We're excluding all commercial buildings and the historic district. There are about 1,900 single-family buildings of various types that would be included in this overlay, and they vary by lot size and the ability to possibly have an ADU. We also are including the zoning code that has duplexes, but we are excluding the RH row house zoning designation. We're excluding it because the existing zoning code currently pretty much allows buildings that are within the scale of our neighborhood. And again, it would only affect new construction, and lot size and building height in the RH category are already in scale with the neighborhood. So now I'm going to move on to the 8 different things we've discussed as the overlay zoning standards. I'll run through them quickly, and then let's go back and stop at each one, and everyone can ask questions and have a discussion. Number 1 is currently, if an alteration or expansion of a 1 or 2 story dwelling, if you pulled a permit for that, you would be allowed to demolish up to 40% of the residence. The overlay would ask that only 10% of the front facade could be demolished, so that we're trying to incentivize saving the front facade. We want to maintain traditional setbacks for sky exposure, solar access. This would not affect garages on existing lots. We'd like to reduce the height from 30 feet to 28 feet on 2-story structures that are pitched roof. But we would allow for dormers to pierce the bulk plane, which would create a very livable interior space. On 2-story flat roofs, cap the height at 22 feet, and on the vertical height on the side interior walls of new construction, reduce it from 17 to 14 feet. We would also like to decrease the existing allowable lot coverage from 37.5% to 35%. This reduces the bulk on a lot. On a 50-foot wide lot, it would reduce the entire square footage by 125 square feet. And on a 37.5-foot lot, it would reduce it by 117 square feet, which is not very much, but with the other restrictions would restrict the mass and bulk of new construction. We would allow dormers to pierce the bulk plane. Low sloped roofs would have a second floor setback. And we would require front porches on new construction because that is a consistent characteristic of the neighborhood. And finally, a minimum first floor elevation of no less than 12 inches and no more than 36 inches. This is how both the porches and the first floor elevation are common characteristics of homes in our neighborhood. And what we're seeking is that new construction will be sensitive and in the same scale with similar characteristics to our neighborhood. If you wanted to pop the top on your house, you could still do that. This would just ask that the design stay within scale of your neighboring houses. If you were going to build an infill lot, this would give you the envelope in which you could construct a new home. And if you were not going to do anything to your house, then the things that are on both sides of you, behind you, and in front of you would be in a scale that was sympathetic to the house that you're living in. So I'm going to back up and take questions about our first proposal, which is to only allow for 10% demolition of the front facade in an effort to encourage maintaining the front facade of a building. Does anyone have questions for Josh or?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions, Victoria.
Go ahead.
So, if you can tear a house down, how does that affect keeping the 10% of the front of it? Or what was that about?
Josh, don't you have to, if you're going to scrape, isn't that a different building permit?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it has to do with the definition of a demolition. And so the Denver zoning code definition of a demolition is any more than 40% of the structure being removed. And so technically, in Congress Park, there's not a prohibition on demolition today. So anybody can demolish their entire structure if they want to, regardless. There's some questions around, there's nothing that prevents someone from demolishing their structures. And so a conservation overlay, technically cannot prevent demolition. Only something like a landmark designation may actually prevent demolition. And so I spoke to a couple teams about this provision, and they were concerned that, limiting maybe someone's ability to preserve a structure, this could actually have the opposite effect. We should really think closely about if trying to force someone to keep, 90% of their front facade, if it would actually just make them say, you know what, I'm just going to demolish the entire building entirely. And so if we're looking at sort of changing the definition of what a demolition is, it might be difficult to pull off in this overlay.
Thanks.
So in other words, well, I guess when we say that we are proposing these things, who's the we at this point?
There's a committee led by me that has developed this criteria to present to the neighborhood for discussion. I don't know if you remember or not, but during the neighborhood planning period, planning encouraged creating an overlay for neighborhoods as a way of preserving the character and scale So we have just moved forward with that.
Okay, so for instance, if you wanted to preserve the scale, let's say you had two bungalows on the side of the house, and you wanted to pop the top under this, you're talking about being sensitive to the two bungalows on the side or whatever. So then would you not be allowed to do a second story house?
No, you could absolutely build a second story. You could absolutely pop the top. There's, it just sets a limit on height, but also allows dormers to puncture the bulk plane.
Okay. I thought there was a comment about mirroring the houses on either side of your house type of thing. So if you had two one-story bungalows, does that create a problem for the
No,
person that wants to?
no. We're just trying to create a scale that there are 1 and 2 story houses next to each other all over Congress Park. We just are trying to prevent having an out of scale house next to a typical already existing house.
Yeah, because for instance, on the height structure, I mean, I'm very sensitive to the idea of having things fit in. But there's plenty of houses, for instance, on the 1400 blocks that are at least 30 feet tall. So they're already apropos, so to speak, to the neighborhood. Yet we're wondering whether we need to go shorter.
It's the bulk of the building on the property. It's the solar access of your neighbor. And we're talking about new construction.
Right. Okay.
Does anyone else have any remarks on this? This is a challenging issue on this particular one. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm having trouble seeing hands. Okay, the next one was maintaining setbacks. Charlotte.
Yeah, it was a general question,
Sure.
for Joshua. Can you hear me? Can you?
Josh?
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Do other neighborhoods have something like this? I mean, are we starting from scratch, or how does this fit into other places in Denver?
Yeah, we do. I think Denver has 78 statistic neighborhoods throughout the entire city. And we've got about 8 conservation overlays for specific districts. So uniquely characteristic neighborhoods, places like the Potter Highlands. It's a bit of a historic district, but also a conservation overlay, or places like Crisana Park, where there's like the unique sort of mid-mod century homes that people want to conserve and preserve. And so it is a zoning tool that can be used to kind of help conserve the character of a neighborhood without going as far as becoming a landmark district. But we have, less than 10 of these specific conservation overlay districts citywide.
Okay. So we're not cutting through totally new territory here. The city recognizes this and other neighborhoods have succeeded in preserving their character.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Josh, with the exception of number one about the facade, I think all these other proposals have been successfully utilized in other overlays, haven't they? Because they came off of Sunnyside and
Mhm.
the bungalow overlay templates. So they've already gone and passed, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think most of these have been approved elsewhere in a different conservation overlay, except maybe, I don't know, let's see, what number 4, the lot coverage percentages numbers. I'm not sure if that one has been. I mean, I know that in like Sunnyside, they actually have a building footprint maximum, which just tackles it a little bit differently, I think. And so,
Right. So we had a discussion about what I have seen in other overlays is the cap on gross square foot. And that neighborhood, the lots, it was based on lots that are 7,500 square feet. That is so much bigger than our neighborhood. Lots generally run between about 4,600 and 62.
Take a journey through Colorado. Edges of the universe.
So to keep the bulk down, we approached it by reducing percentage of lot coverage. How do you feel about that? How do you think Board of Adjustments would look at that proposal?
yeah, I think it's a possibility. And it gets a little bit potentially complicated with, for reviewers, maybe. There's something that, staff, our plan review staff is always concerned about complicating how difficult it is to actually review a project. And so I would say the simpler the better, something straightforward, like maybe that's why we've resulted on just the maximum square footage previously, because it's easy to calculate and just to figure out. There might be concerns internally. I mean, it's something I'd have to take to, some of my review teams within the city, but I think it's doable.
Somewhere they have to come up with percentage of lot coverage, right?
It's true, yeah, and it's something that the developer, the builder should provide on the plans, for us. But I think it's something that staff has to verify, in
Right.
reviewing, and so it could complicate some of the math. But I will add that, we have a bundle of text amendments that is currently out for public review. I'll put a link to that document in the chat. And what they're actually, one of the things they're proposing to do in that bundle of amendments is to change how lot coverage is calculated, because currently we do have that 37% allowable coverage on most lots in the city. It kind of depends on lot size, as you kind of described there a little bit. But then there's also exemptions for things like a front porch and like a garage and an ADU. And so
Right.
it does get complicated. I think in the bundle, they actually looked at removing the exemptions, but just increasing the allowable coverage up to something like 45% on a lot of lot sizes. And so, 6-1, half a dozen, it kind of makes it potentially easier for reviewers to calculate it in total. I'm not sure, but that is the proposal currently. And so we might want to see where that lands. It's not adopted yet by City Council, but it is moving through that process. So we should keep an eye on that and see where that lands before, obviously proposing something else.
Are you saying 41% would then include porches and garages?
You got it. Yeah, I think it would be a maximum total
Total.
coverage of 45% on most lot sizes, depending. But I'll put that link in the chat so we can
That'd be
just
great.
review it.
Does anyone have any remarks about percentage of lot coverage?
Well, I think part of it, to his point, is it's already pretty complicated formula if you have the house attached to the garage or unattached, and then the porches and whether they're covered or not covered. But this one thing, require front porches to be a minimum of 6 feet by 20 feet. I mean, there's plenty of Victorians in the neighborhood that don't have a big, expansive front porch currently. And so, again, I think that, my concern with all this is that because I haven't seen infills in the neighborhood be a problem, except on a couple occasions, things that I wouldn't have preferred. But nonetheless, I mean, you're restricting a lot of styles here. I mean, suppose somebody wanted to build a Victorian with the old-fashioned small front porch. With this required porch idea, you can't do that, even though the house would be in keeping with what the neighborhood already has in its inventory. So is it necessary to have a requirement for front porches? That's a design thing that, if you have not a lot, some bungalows don't even have a big porch like that. They might have a half a porch. So your Denver squares tend to have, the big porches, but not all houses do.
Well,
John, would you like to respond?
Well, I would say the predominant character that I think of in Congress Park is the front porch. And I think the size of the front porch, certainly on bungalows, you can find exceptions within the district, but I would say the majority of homes have this characteristic.
Yeah, I would disagree with that, but as you know, John, with houses in the historic district, which this is not, I understand, but it becomes, some of these stipulations become so complicated that nobody wants to deal with anything. It becomes so difficult to make changes to a house that architects and builders don't even want to be involved in the project sometimes.
This is new. Vic, didn't you say this was about new construction, not about
Yes,
amending your own house?
correct.
Okay.
Correct. This is new construction. And I would also challenge the premise of all these small porches. Oftentimes, a porch has been removed rather than replaced. And again, whatever your house is right now, this is not about anything but new construction. And I think the goal here is to promote new construction that has characteristics, scale, setback, height, that is a characteristic shared with the rest of the architecture of the neighborhood. I think we've all experienced neighborhoods where the architecture became very large and very out of scale with adjacent properties. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid. In terms of style, we have not in any way dictated materiality, whether a roof has to be pitched or flat. We are simply asking about scale and massing on a lot. Anyone else? Does everyone understand the first floor elevation much of Congress Park, about 2/3 of it, sits on a hill as you move away from 6th, 7th, and 8th Avenue. And you have to not only walk up steps to enter a house, you have to walk up steps to get on grade to enter house. With new construction, they would like to push that completely flat, and it changes how the facade of a house looks, modern or traditional, on a streetscape. Do we have any more, John?
Josh,
Any-
I have a question regarding something you said about the percentage of lot coverage using that type of calculation versus gross square footage above grade. And the thinking with reducing the percentage to my way of thinking is that is something that the zoning review, building review could simply plug in instead of 37.5%. They're using all of the same criteria,
Right.
but they've decreased it to 35% versus trying to calculate above grade square footage and then having to potentially establish where exactly is the grade, or what happens if you have garden level, say along an avenue, and how does that enter into what is above grade? Or if we're talking above grade and I have I can build 3,000 square feet above grade, it could be possible that I could stuff the lot with a ranch form, not even a 2-story, that met the purely gross square footage above grade, to my way of thinking. So I'm just curious how the city feels that the gross calculation if is easier potentially than just decreasing the percentage as a tool.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure either way. I don't work on the residential permit review team. I would just have to verify with those parties that they felt it was, appropriate and the right way to do it. It's just kind of anytime you sort of introduce, a new regulation, it has the possibility to slow down permit times and review times and whatever. It's just a calculation difference. And so it's just, it's not my jurisdiction to make that decision, but I think you might be right. Yeah, I think it is definitely a possibility, and I'll vet it with those teams.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Kathleen.
Yes, I just want to be sure that I understand exactly what we're talking about here. So this is guidelines for new construction. There
Yes.
are, it seems to me, reading some of these houses that have been recently built in the neighborhood that would not conform to these criteria. In particular, the great big cubes that have shown up on several lots. So one example is the corner of St. Paul and 11th. 2 great big blocks were built there. So that type of thing would not be allowed, in particular, the one that says the setback on the 2nd floor,
Right.
for flat roofs. So with these criteria, we would not see any more of those. Is that correct?
Not in that shape. I'm not sure what the square footage above grade is, but no, it would
They're
not
30
stop.
They're 3,500 square foot houses.
And they're single family.
And they pretty much, between the house and the garage, they look very much like they're covering the lot. I mean, they're set back on the front and the side. But so this number 6, low slope or flat roof require a front setback on the second floor. So that means you couldn't have a big cube. You would have to do something on the second floor.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was a good question.
Just as a clarification, Josh, if I'm not mistaken, on flat roof structures now, there is in the zoning code a requirement to step that second floor front wall back. So I don't believe this is a new requirement or proposal that is different from what's in the code. Is that correct, or do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, it'd be the third floor that would be step back in our latest requirements, and so there's not a second floor step back
Okay. So
currently.
when you hit the third floor.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Which is why those forms
Mhm.
were allowed, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I thought we'd have a lot more discussion tonight. This outline will be posted on the website. The meeting's recorded. It'll be on the website as well. And we will come back to this topic many times over the next few months. So please encourage your neighbors to take a look. And Josh, thank you so much for taking time out this evening to talk to us about this. This is a short meeting. I have a couple announcements. Our annual membership meeting will be in December, and I have an announcement about public health sent us a notice. If anyone has seen it on an email blast or a website, the contractor for BRT has applied for a variance that would allow them to make construction noise around the clock. The variance would allow them to make construction noise all night long, and the time frame is for 4 years. The construction site goes from Broadway to Yosemite, but I think a significant period of time will have around the clock noise along Colfax that borders Congress Park. I would encourage everyone to take a look at this and voice your opinions to Chris Hines. And we're talking to other neighborhoods. They don't say how loud the noise can be, but if experience from I-70 is anything, it'll be loud. Maggie.
Well, one of our neighbors has already inquired about it, and has sent some information. Essentially, there will be some sound checks made by the city sound engineer. And they will be taking that to a meeting in November, I believe. I think that's listed in the information that we've shared. So stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted everyone to be aware. I know we've had a lot of information about BRT and not felt very heard. But we will keep trying to keep you informed. Again, thank you everyone for coming, and John, your hand is up. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Good
Good
night.
night.